Do you really know what's going on between Israel and Iran, or are you just seeing what they want you to see? Because while you're watching the news and reading the headlines, a silent war is being waged behind the scenes, with decisions that aren't made public, pacts that aren't reported, and attacks that aren't shown. The truth is being covered up, and what's behind it could change absolutely everything. We're not just talking about missiles, sirens, or armed clashes. We're looking at a much larger operation, a global strategy of disinformation, manipulation, and control. The conflict between Israel and Iran has intensified, that's true. But is what you're seeing really the whole story, or just the part they want you to see? In recent days, the world has witnessed scenes of destruction, explosions in Tel Aviv, declarations of war, retaliation, and nuclear threats. All of this is presented as a logical and inevitable sequence of events, as if it were just another regional crisis in the Middle East. But what if I told you that there is a hidden script behind all of this? A carefully planned sequence of events to direct attention only to what is in the interests of certain groups. This is not just a war with weapons. It is a war of narratives, where the truth is fragmented, distorted, and manipulated to shape public opinion, influence political decisions, and hide the true intentions behind each action. Have you ever noticed how the global mainstream media always treats Israel more harshly than its enemies? How most outlets try to justify Iran's attacks as a legitimate response, while portraying any Israeli defense as disproportionate aggression? This is no coincidence. This is narrative control. This is the great deception beginning before our eyes, and few realize it. What is at stake here is not just territory, but control of information and truth. And this manipulation has deeper roots than many realize: spiritual, prophetic, and eschatological roots. There is a clear attempt to silence everything that points to the fulfillment of ancient prophecies. Ezekiel 38 and 39, the siege against Israel, the involvement of specific nations, the preparation for a war of biblical proportions. But you will not see this on the news. They will continue to show only what fits within the framework of their interests. That is why today we are going to break this silence. We are going to reveal what the media is hiding from you about the conflict between Israel and Iran. We are going to show the details that have been omitted, the connections that no one talks about, the behind the scenes that have been ignored, and how all of this is deeply connected to a plan that goes beyond politics and war. A plan that involves the spirit of deception, the preparation for global chaos, and the advancement of an agenda that many still refuse to see. You need to be aware, not only of what is being shown, but of what is being avoided. Because when you put together the pieces that the mainstream media separates, the picture that emerges is much clearer and much more frightening. With each attack, each statement, each purposeful silence, the spiritual and geopolitical siege closes in around Israel. And if you want to understand what is really happening, stay with me until the end of this video, because what we are going to show you now could be the key to understanding not only the present, but also the next steps of this hidden war. The international mainstream media has been repeating a carefully structured narrative that day after day conditions the public's perception of what is really happening between Israel and Iran. On the news, in the headlines, and on the most influential news portals on the planet, we see a pattern repeating itself. When Iran attacks, it is presented as a reaction, a justifiable response to decades of tension and supposed oppression. But when Israel defends itself, it is immediately labeled an aggressor, an extremist, and responsible for the escalation of the conflict. This moral inversion does not happen by chance. It is the result of a selective narrative, where facts are chosen, cut out, and presented in a way that serves a greater interest, often political, ideological, or spiritual. During the 12 days of attacks that rocked Tel Aviv, for example, most of the reporting in the West focused on how many Palestinian civilians might be affected by a possible Israeli response, but almost none of it focused on the fact that schools, hospitals, and residential neighborhoods in Israel were being hit by ballistic missiles fired directly from Iran. The number of sirens triggered, the number of lives at risk, the number of public structures destroyed, all of this was given a cold shoulder or simply ignored. Meanwhile, every defensive action by the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, was quickly labeled as excessive, disproportionate, or unjustifiable. This manipulation of information creates a false symmetry where the country that suffers attacks is treated as the culprit, and those that fire missiles are seen as resistance. The numbers presented are distorted, the contexts ignored, and the result is an increasingly misinformed public, vulnerable to misleading and dangerous narratives. What many fail to realize is that this selectivity is not just a failure of journalism, it is part of a larger plan of informational warfare, where truth ceases to be a commitment and becomes a tool of manipulation. Images are carefully chosen to arouse selective empathy. Statements are edited to reverse intentions. The time of exposure in the news is controlled according to the message that is intended to be conveyed. Everything is calculated to the millimeter. And so, Israel is presented as the villain, even when it is clearly defending itself from existential threats. This type of manipulation fuels international hatred, strengthens anti-Semitism, isolates the country in the eyes of global public opinion, and even worse, paves the way for the darkest prophecies about the siege of nations to be fulfilled before a passive audience, which has already been convinced that the wrong side is the right one. Can you see this? Have you ever noticed how some information seems to disappear or simply doesn't stand out? If you're aware of this pattern, comment below, "I see the control of information." And if you notice that there is something very wrong with the way they are showing this war, write in the comments. The truth is being manipulated. While the eyes of the world are focused on what is being shown on the screens, the missiles being launched, the rubble in Israeli cities, the calculated statements of world leaders, another scenario is unfolding far from the spotlight. What is really happening behind the scenes is even more worrying and completely ignored by most people. There is a game being played on an invisible board, where alliances are being sealed in silence, where military and strategic decisions are being made behind the scenes, and where the conflict between Israel and Iran serves as a cover for something much bigger. Iran is not alone. By its side, directly or indirectly, are powerful forces such as Russia, China, Hezbollah, and Syria. Russia and Iran have maintained military cooperation for years that goes far beyond diplomatic exchanges. Recently, intelligence satellites detected suspicious movements of military equipment in strategic areas of Iran, some with advanced Russian air defense technology and medium-range missiles. This is no coincidence, it is alignment. China, in turn, has been quietly providing electronic components and logistical support, strengthening Iranian communications and tracking systems. Hezbollah, Iran's armed wing in Lebanon, is already positioning itself north of Israel, ready to open a new front of attack if ordered. And Syria, despite being devastated by years of civil war, remains a strategic point for accessing and transporting weapons and troops. These moves are not improvised. They follow a logic, a plan, a silent mechanism that moves as Israel reacts. Everything is meticulously designed to weaken the Jewish state on several fronts. We are talking about hybrid warfare, physical, cyber, psychological, and information attacks. While missiles fall from the sky, viruses are being launched on servers, silent sabotage is being carried out, and shady negotiations are being conducted behind closed doors. The objective is clear: to surround Israel, exhaust it, isolate it internationally, and force a political or military surrender. And in the midst of all this, prophecy cannot be ignored. The alignment of these nations with a central role in the sacred texts draws the attention of those who watch the signs of the times. Ezekiel 38 speaks of an army coming from the north, accompanied by allies such as Persia, Iran, Gomer, Togarma, regions of Asia, and others. What was symbolic today becomes literal. Prophetic connections are being formed before our eyes, but the mainstream media ignores or ridicules anyone who dares to make this association. They don't want you to see what is forming spiritually behind the political and military chaos. These details will not be shown in the newspapers, they will not be in the headlines, but here we reveal them. And if you have come this far, it is because you are awakening to something greater. You are understanding that there is a war in the shadows, where the true weapons are silence, lies, and deception. There is something that many have not yet realized. What is behind this war between Israel and Iran is not just a territorial, political, or military dispute. What we are witnessing is the revelation of a spiritual plan that was prophesied thousands of years ago. The Bible clearly warns us in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 about a time when a great deception would come upon the world, capable of blinding even those who know the truth. This deception would not be just political, but would have a profound spiritual component, manipulating perceptions, distorting facts, and distancing people from the true revelation. And that is exactly what is happening now. While the world watches rockets cross the skies of Tel Aviv and inflammatory statements between world leaders, a spiritual operation is underway, preparing the stage for the arrival of a global system of control and the manifestation of the Antichrist. Ezekiel 38 and 39 had already predicted the formation of a coalition of nations against Israel. The text speaks of Gog, from the land of Magog, and his allies, including Persia, which we now know as Iran. These chapters describe the time when these nations would march against the land of Israel in the last days with one purpose: to surround, attack, and attempt to destroy the chosen people. What we are seeing now is the literal construction of this scenario. The alliance between Iran, Russia, China, Syria, and others is not just geopolitical, it is spiritual. It is the step-by-step fulfillment of what was written by the prophets. And this is no exaggeration. Just look with spiritual eyes. Israel is being surrounded, judged, vilified, and isolated before the world. The pressure on Jerusalem is increasing, just as Zechariah 12 foretold. All the nations will gather against her. But there is something even deeper. The system that is being built before our eyes aims to confuse, deceive, and silence the truth. The voices that warn about these prophecies are ridiculed. Spiritual connections are treated as conspiracy theories. And little by little, people are being led to accept a new world order where right is relativized and evil is normalized. This is the spirit of the Antichrist already at work, preparing the ground for his definitive revelation. Therefore, this conflict is not just another war. It is a battle between light and darkness, between truth and deception. And those who are not spiritually alert will easily be swept away by the current of this great global deception. If you've come this far, it's because you're not seeing the world through the same eyes as most people. You feel like there's something going on, something that few people notice. So subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. That's the only way you'll receive the next videos that reveal what's being hidden. Leave a like if this content opened your eyes, and write in the comments, "I am awake to the truth." And now, keep watching the next video that is appearing on the screen. It brings information that few have the courage to show.